Hi and welcome to the SP Podcast. In today's episode we are talking to Sami Huseyin, an S&C coach who's building a strong reputation in both junior and senior sport. In today's episode we are talking all things athlete development and looking at how we can best support an athlete as they grow within their sport. So we obviously know each other through the world of tennis and racket sports, but what are you currently focusing on outside of that currently?
So obviously you know me through Move for Sport, where I work with a plethora of young tennis athletes that we share as coaches. And outside of that, I've got my own business, SHSC, where I work with invasion sports athletes, aspiring athletes, and also everyday athletes. So it's more kind of the 18 plus end. So it's almost like I've got that full journey from my Move Sport work all the way into my own business.
Perfect. And when it comes to, S&C, where you've got junior athletes and you've got senior athletes, what do you find the real differentiation is in terms of your focus and your job role working with those athletes?
That's a great question. And I get it asked quite a lot, to be honest, especially from parents. I've got siblings at different ages or different points in time. And essentially with what we call long-term athlete development. So from child, I think there's coined the term child to champion. I can't remember off the top of my head who said that. But essentially, as a child matures, there's different things that need to be developed. Obviously, the body goes through different stages. And so first and foremost, we want to make sure that development is good. So we want to make sure the body is developing appropriately. And obviously, when you've got a sporting athlete, a young athlete, you're going to put the child through high levels of stress and strain through the body. So we want to make sure first and foremost they are playing their sport. So making sure we're underpinning all the physical development that they need using what we also know as the athletic toolbox. So your classic push, pull, hinge, squat, lunge, rotate and brace. And so making sure that's good and their movement proficiency is good is the key. And then as they develop through the long-term athlete development, there's certain aspects of maturity that change. So when they grow through, for example, you're talking about 13 and 14, and I'll keep this short, peak height velocity, so the speed at which they grow the fastest, normally known as a growth spurt. We want to make sure we're sometimes, depending on the individual, not loading them. They're becoming a lot spongier with their movement, so their ankles are more compliant. So especially for tennis, their change direction is going to slow down. Their gait is going to kind of look like a newborn giraffe. And then therefore we get to that point where we need to make sure that's for focus at the time. So you can see at different elements of the stage, we need to kind of ensure that they're developing appropriately. And then as you get to performance level, so that's kind of from 15, 16 upwards, we start focusing on outcome-driven goals. So developing strength. Obviously with tennis, you want to develop eccentric strength, so lengthening strength for change of direction. Want to look at speed, power, and then the conditioning. So a kind of a global development as you approach there. So you can see as we go across that long-term athlete development, there is almost a teetering of development throughout, so that if you are part of that process at one stage, whatever coach goes on next, you'll give it to them and give them the development they need to then go to the next level.
That's really interesting. When it comes to, you talk about kind of the athlete life cycle and kind of the start to kind of progression of development. When would you say is the best time to kind of start this process? So if you're a junior athlete, let's say you're working in tennis or football or whatever sport it is, when would you say you need to really start kind of this journey of S&C to really benefit you as an athlete?
Yeah, again, another great question. And I'll be honest, it's how long is a piece of string, if I'm honest? And so, or it's the $64 million question. And what I mean by that is, depending on where you are and kind of how old you are, it's very relative. And when we talk about strength and conditioning, when we talk about physical development, that in itself is individualized into the person. So what I mean by that is strength training or physical development for an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old is going to look a lot different to someone of 24, 25. But in principle, the development is still the same. And so It's basically trying to achieve an outcome through different means. So for a younger 5 or 6-year-old, it's going to be gamified. There's going to be a lot of gross motor skill development. It's going to look slightly different. And that is still in essence S&C. And so for me, the earlier the better. And so with a good S&C coach, a good youth development coach, you'll start to see the way you build that up as I talk through that kind of, as you said, athlete lifestyle or kind of long-term athlete development, it really depends on what's available and who's around you. But as young as 5 or 6 would be my start, and then developing that further, just carry on little by little. And then obviously, depending on where the athlete is and the age and ability, when you go to 11, 12, that's where you start to see an increase of match demands, such as tennis going into kind of from orange to yellow or to green to yellow. So you start to see that change. Therefore, that's when the level of S&C will start to increase and the actual exposure will increase as well.
You said something really interesting there, which I think people will be interested in hearing more about, is gamification, and especially with junior athletes, making it into a game. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on kind of what that looks like? Maybe for like a junior athlete, what would a kind of gamification of a session look like?
Yeah, awesome. I think, because for me, I'm someone as a kid, I would get bored if someone would just talk to me and I'd have a lot of structure. And so I know, kind of firsthand, how quick you can lose focus and lose drive for something, especially as a youth athlete. We're thinking of kids that are 10, 11, 12. Like, they are called youth athletes, but they're still kids. And so for me, gamification is massive. Like, it's so big because you want to engage, you want to get that buy-in from the kid. And for example, for one of my athletes, we have different games to warm up with. So got one kid at the moment, actually, we share that individual. We have a little plyometric game, and it's 5 stages, and it's literally he's got the tram line and he's bouncing single leg left to right, and he's got a ball in his hand, and the level of progressions are in relation to what he's got to do with the hand-eye coordination. But in essence, he's still doing a single leg plyo, bouncing or pogo. And so what we're trying to do there is expose him to high amounts of kind of low amplitude plyometrics. At the same time, I'm getting him to try and develop his coordination, and it's a little bit of a game, how quickly he can get from level 1 to 5. And so that's the warm up essentially of our session. And so when he comes and he does his mobility training, does all of that, and then we move into this session, it's just a little quick 5 minutes that gets him nice and kind of tuned into the session. But also as well, it's got the means to an end. It's got that benefit that I'm looking for, and he enjoys it. And so that in itself is, for him, a little game that he can do whenever he wants to do in terms of match training, etc., outside of me. But then I'm actually got him bought into the idea of that training. So that's a prime example. I think there's 101 different ways. There's a couple of good Instagram accounts that have it. I can't remember the top of my head. I'll send you over. But essentially anything that involves some sort of intent or competition where essentially the athlete themselves or youth athlete forgets they're actually working, because that's what we want to try and do. We want to engage them, we want to make it fun, but also so that they can actually develop and see the progress, which is also another thing of improving that self-esteem and confidence.
No, 100%. As you know, with me, I do very similar stuff in terms of obviously the psychology side, where if you're a player who's struggling with nerves or stress or pressure on certain points, it's really, really effective to make it into a game, make it fun, and then you can talk about how the game's gone, and you can kind of get that interaction in the same way you would from a standard conversation, but they've already engaged into that kind of fun gamification, rather than, like you say, just kind of preaching information and trying to teach them from a traditional means. So I think it's a really useful tool, especially when it comes to, say, plyometrics and things like that, which jumping alone isn't particularly fun. But actually, when you make it into a game and there's levels they can complete and they can kind of score themselves and also see progress as weeks go on and on, it's a really effective way to kind of get that buy-in, especially from junior players. So it's a really interesting area, I think.
Yeah, I just want to add to that as well. I think the biggest thing about the buy-in and the rapport is, especially with youth athletes, if you don't get that, maybe not instant connection, but you don't create that rapport and that buy-in from the youth athlete, then that relationship dwindles very, very quickly. Kids get bored. Yeah. And I think it's a lot for youth development, and those coaches that are in the game of youth S&C, they soon develop this intrinsic ability to have that as a base level. Because I think when you work with kids, the one thing I'm always focused on is making sure they're coming in with a smile or they're leaving with a smile, no matter the physical development. Obviously that is very important, we know that, but for me that's that's the holistic approach I like to take, and I think that pays dividends longer down the line, because you get the adherence. Your words mean that they have more of a weight, gravitas towards them, and that buying tends to build up over time. And then when they hit 14, 15, 16, the more global development in terms of nutrition, your kind of mental and mindset, mobility, and the just general routine and application as a youth athlete is adhered to a greater degree, because they know what you're talking about through previous experience is right.
Yeah. And I think, just to add to that, I think is we obviously work with some older players as well who, kind of really embrace this as they kind of go up the performance ladder. But we kind of make up a kind of multidisciplinary team, really. S&C, physio, psychology, tennis, coaching, everything is all one big team. And you want that child or junior athlete to really buy in that you're part of their team. You're here to help. You're part of their support network. You're part of their journey moving forward. And you're here to kind of really push them to succeed and to kind of achieve things in the sport, rather than being, we're going off to see this person for an hour. You are kind of embracing that unity in terms of their kind of team setup, really. And I think that's a really important area which you can really get that buy-in and really get that kind of enjoyment factor up when it's, they really feel you're one of their team members.
Definitely. And yeah, I think that in itself as well is if you can get a youth athlete to confide in you is massive, because then you then actually get to understand the person before the athlete as well, which is as important, as I said before, with my holistic approach.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, one thing you touched upon earlier, which I think is a really interesting area, is you obviously work with kind of invasion-based sports, but you also work with tennis, which is obviously a racket-based sport.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, what really differentiates the two in terms of their needs and requirements, in your space of S&C?
So I think it's a tough one, because we sometimes we go into obviously too much of a kind of a microscopic lens of approach. And yes, when required, it is needed. And at the highest levels, 100%, when we look at kind of at top level performance, we're looking at certain aspects of injury prevention. So isometric holds at the knee, at the hip, the knee, at the ankle, and certain metrics. Obviously, for invasion sports, match demands are completely different to tennis. You've got tennis as a maximal distance of probably about 8 meters from a diagonal court, whereas when you're looking at football, you've got 110 meters potentially from a counter-attack. So there's a massive change in demands. Now, obviously, we want to make sure that resiliency and robustness is at the forefront. So keeping players fit, because the sport is the king. The more they play their sport, the better they're going to get. And so making sure these key areas for each individual sport are focused on. So for rugby, neck development, isometric neck strength is really important. 1 for concussion, but 2 for just general upper body strength. Football as well, you're looking at hip flexors, you're looking at calf, and then that kind of ties in with tennis as well, because a lot of sports, if you take tennis as a principle, it's a change of direction of sport. Yes, we are going lateral to sideways, but we're rotating our hips, so it's still a linear fashion. So yes, their sports are different, but there's a lot more in common than there are different. Obviously, at the higher end, that's where the differences are kind of magnified. So that you see my point, I'm very hesitant to go into that depth, but from a fundamental sense, we want to develop the athlete toolbox, as I said before, and develop that robustness and resilience, and then we can get in a little bit more specific. And that's where, as an S&C coach or a performance development coach, the needs analysis is key. And what the needs analysis key is essentially is looking at the sport and the match demands, looking at the player themselves and going, okay, right, where are the deficits? Where can we improve on? And that gets the robustness and the resilience ticked off. And then we start going, okay, right, strength, speed, power, let's develop them biomotor qualities.
No, 100%. I think that's a really interesting point where, like you say, if you get quicker, you get stronger, you get more bulletproof in terms of your joints. That is universally going to be useful, not just in sport but in life. So touching upon what you said, if you were to speak to a parent of an athlete who doesn't know a whole lot about S&C, what would you say is an important aspect to really need to be addressed straight away? Where can we look to get that immediate buy-in, that immediate, easy first benefit?
So for me, I'd take a step back, and with a youth athlete, it'd be like, let's make sure they're developing in a manner that is not causing any dysfunction or any issues or increasing likelihood of injury. So that's with youth athletes, they're a specialized population. So because they're growing, because they're developing, they're going to naturally open themselves up to deficiencies, tightness. And so we want to make sure, first and foremost, that's ticked off, because obviously if you're a tennis player or any other youth player, or if you are someone that plays sport, and then you're someone that plays sport and you're a youth athlete, that's a load on top of exposure. And so that's where you start to see issues arise, and that's where you get a lot of kind of knee issues, which are normally obviously overuse injuries, but you start to get these kind of growth related issues and kind of injuries. And so for me, it's, let's make sure that, one, we know where they are in terms of the development. So where they are in their maturation. Are they pre-onset or post, which is pre-puberty, onset, or post, or pre-pubertal, mid, and post. And then after that, let's have a look at kind of how they move, movement proficiencies. And then following that, let's have a look, once we've kind of made sure that there's no key areas that need a bit of attention, we start developing from the ground up. So that would be the athletic toolbox. And so you can see there's this pillaring effect of kind of building from the base upwards, so that we get that holistic physical development. And then obviously, alongside that, we've got the kind of mental and emotional side, which is the fun games and the environment that you create. And so for me, any parents listening, it's find someone that is reputable in youth development, not just a PT, because PTs are brilliant at what they do in terms of adult, but we got to understand that youth population is a specialized population. There is information and knowledge that you need to withhold to understand what's going on at that time. And so there's further education required. On top of that, it's not just find someone that's reputable. Find someone that when your kids have session with, they enjoy thoroughly. And what I mean by that is they are beaming from cheek to cheek from before the game or before the session to post. And not always, because obviously with adolescence, there's that moody sort of kind of age range. But find someone that your kids genuinely get on with, because it makes such a difference. And also it says to me as well, if your kid generally enjoys the company of your coach, the coach is invested in their development. They want to help them. They go above and beyond to make sure that not just they're doing well physically, but they're having some fun. So they're my two key points.
100%. I feel that the fun aspect is something where not enough attention is sometimes placed on it. In terms of, we can look at a CV of any coach, be it S&C, be it tennis, be it whatever. You can have a phenomenal CV. You can have, all the accolades and awards in the world. But if the bond between the player and the coach isn't there, and that kind of enjoyment factor, then the results are going to be hampered quite quickly. Doesn't matter how good the CV of the coach is, doesn't matter how the experience they have. They need to be a good fit together. Where you're spending a lot of time together. Hours and hours and hours every single year going through their development. They need to enjoy the sessions, but also enjoy the being in the same room together and going on this journey together. And I think the second point, which I thought was really interesting, was when I was a junior athlete many, many years ago, I had a lot of injuries, and then it was a case of, we need to go fix these injuries now. But obviously that was a long, painful process where I missed out on a lot of competition, a lot of kind of progress I could have been making when I was rehabbing my elbow and my shoulder and bits and bobs, where I think, like you said, where if we can build up that base from the start, you then don't have to necessarily have this massive issue at the end where you go, right, now we need to fix things. You can build up that strength and that mobility and that kind of stability aspect, and then kind of keep that progress moving, rather than having a kind of break and fix model
scenario.
I think obviously mine was many, many years ago, but it was something that I would have really appreciated at the time. I think where if I could have stayed fit and stayed competing without having long prolonged period of times where I'm sidelined for injury and going through painful rehab and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a really, really important point, really, where it's start before something goes wrong. In a really simple, simplistic way, is start before you then have to try and fix a problem.
I mean, I think everyone can relate to this. Is when everyone gets ill, you wish you were healthy, but then when you're healthy, you never think about your health. And for that example, just think of your kid's development. It's a case of like, if the kid's playing a lot of sport, then demands and exposure is going to be very high. And so you just increase the likelihood for something to not develop as it should. And then because of that, you need something to really make sure kind of, I got a mentor and he always goes on about what gets measured, gets managed. And it's important if we can track the development of a youth athlete, then we can make sure that, okay, right, the volume this week's a bit too high. We need to pull back a little bit, or hang on a minute, there's a bit of issue kind of with interlimb strength, hamstring potentially is an issue. We need to make sure that we're kind of monitoring that. And these little things are kind of little golden nuggets that only occur maybe once or twice through maybe a course of 6 months, but they're key to pick up if you've got the right people around you. And it's just very important, that whole kind of aspect. So I definitely say to parents, like, it's the more we have that open conversation about physical development and the more exposure, the better.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think that kind of leads me on really to what I was going to ask you next, which was, you've obviously learned a lot of great information. You've kind of developed this toolbox of skills and knowledge and everything in this space. So if you could go back in time and you could meet 12-year-old Sami and you could have a conversation about what you've learned and how you would embrace that into your physical development back in the day, what would you say to 12-year-old Sami in terms of to make changes or to make improvements to his kind of training?
Yeah, that's interesting point. Give you a bit of backstory. The reason why I developed my SNC was because of my younger self. And as a result, when I was 16, 17, not so much 12, physically, I just wasn't anywhere near my peers. And little bit did I know that I was a late maturer, and I started physically developing and getting that increase in muscle mass when I was 18 or 19, believe it. So I was a very late maturer, which would plague me a lot when I played, because when I was in school, I kind of played in all the sport teams. I was in the A team as everything, and I was technically all right. I won't kind of a world beater or anything special, but I was in the top teams. And what I did find was the players that were the best in the teams were basically mini adults, and they were a lot stronger, a lot quicker, a lot more explosive. And I just was like, when is this going to happen to me? And I was scratching my head, and from the age of 16, I started going to the gym, and I think back to what I was doing in the gym and I cringe, because it was just complete and utter guesswork. And my only thing to my younger self would be find a mentor, find a trainer, find someone who can teach you the right ways at an early stage, but then also enjoy the process.
Yeah.
And this goes back to my philosophy as a coach, and a holistic approach is find the journey of striving to a bigger goal, or kind of developing to the aspiration. Find the enjoyment in that process, and make sure it's sustainable in that approach, because we all want to kind of get better every day and reach certain milestones and goals. But the one thing for me was, I remember trying to bite off more than I could chew. I remember trying to go gym 3-4 days in a row, and then I'd be out for 2 weeks because I'd just be knackered and tired. And I remember even to one point, I had 80 kilos on my back at 17 years old. And the bar, I missed re-racking the bar, and it went on top of me. And it was the first ever gym accident I ever had. And it froze me. I didn't go gym for 2 weeks after that. And it was, obviously that's a safety matter, but it was all around education, having the right people around you. And I think if I said to myself, and this is what I do love about social media now, there is so much advice, some not so great, of trying to get into good habits and building that physical development from an early age. And training isn't a bad thing from a young age if done correctly with the right people around you. So for my younger self, it would be find someone that knows what they're talking about, enjoy that process, don't put too much pressure on yourself. And the last thing would be, not every session is going to be a good session. I have this, I don't know where I got it from, I'm definitely plagiarizing somewhere, but it's a 20-60-20 rule. And 20% of your sessions are going to be insane. Everything you do, everything you lift, everything's working. You're hitting PBs. You're feeling super strong, super explosive. You can take on the world. 60% of your sessions are going to be bog standard average. You go in, get your work done, feel okay, and then leave. And like this morning, when I went on my run this morning, 20% are just awful. I was going to swear, but just like, honestly, something you don't want to do it. You're so demotivated. You can't be bothered. Throwing toys at the pram, but you go in, do it, get out, get it done, or get done. That's what I like to say. So it's about understanding that. Once you understand that, and that goes to percentages, 6 days out of a month will be awful dog days.
Yeah.
Once you get that kind of understanding, then you're like, okay, right, this is one of those 6 days. Let's just get through it. Let's get through it, because there's going to be another one of those 6 days, 1 or 2 per week, that are going to be insane. And I'm just going to find that one. And having that mental reframe, will really change the way you view development and through progress. So that's the couple of things that I would definitely suggest to my younger self. And even now, I do talk to my youth athletes, it's the ones that are going to university for scholarships or that approach in that A-level stage, talking to them about that and trying to get them to reframe it, because the drive is only going to come from them.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. The 20-60-20 thing. I'm going to paraphrase Roger Federer here, so I'm going to butcher exactly what he said. But it was around the lines of, you play a point, you might hit the best point ever, or you've had an absolute shocker. Either way, the next point starts, and you move on to the next one. It's just a point, it's done, move on. And I think it's the same mentality around, training sessions and days, of progress, where it's very easy to kind of think back and kind of ruminate on the bad days. And it's like, that was so bad. Why was it bad? Yeah, you panic and you go, oh, am I a bad athlete now? Am I struggling now? Do I need to change something now? But like you say, 60 and 20, totaling to 80% of the time, you've got either a decent session or a great session. But it's very, very easy to go that 20% which are bad and kind of catastrophize it and go down the route of, I need to make changes, I need to do X, Y, Z to kind of fix a problem. But like you say, it's not a problem, it's just life. There's multiple reasons why you might have a bad session. You're tired, had a bad sleep, had a tough day at school or work, or whatever it is. Even at a certain age, the hormonal balance is off, and you are in a position where you're just not in the headspace or in the position to have a good session. But it is what it is, and it's just like you say, moving on to the next one and just continually making that progress really is really important. So I think it's a rule where, I know it's not a strict rule, but it's a rule where we can keep in mind and really kind of help frame bad days more than the others, because as you say, it's easy to become stuck after 1, 2 of those in a row and think it's an issue. But in reality, this is part of that 20.
Yeah, I think even to the point where I think Roger Federer in that same interview turned around and said 54% of his points he's won. So 46 of his points he's lost in his entire career. And it's for a top level athlete to lose 40% of the points they play.
Live. Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, Roger. So I really think it, and that's the thing with nowadays. And I don't want to touch on it too much, because we could go into another podcast episode about kind of goal setting and mental reframe and kind of that stuff. And obviously that's right up your street, and I'm so key for it. And I think it's important to understand that today there's a lot of instant gratification. A lot of people want wins now, and it's like, well, no, hang on a minute. That's not the matter of facts. That's not when we go to probability and statistics. It's a Pareto principle. And so 20 to 80%, like out of 100% of a job done, 20% of the fraction is the hard work, in terms of it does a tenth of what is required. Yeah. The 80% is just all the how do I say it without swearing again? is all kind of just fluff, shall we say? Yeah. And so it's really important to understand and get that, because at the end of the day, that when you train, 20% of the training session is probably going to make 80 or 20% of the training session is going to be the best session you have, but then also make the demands to develop you further. Yeah. And it's key to understand that. Obviously, I don't want to touch on that too much in terms of specifics, but it's a good rule of thumb to follow. And yeah, like I said, I think it's an imperative to make sure that when we think about training, we think about progression and development, especially at the youth stage, making kids aware of that is vital. And there's one individual that I'm thinking of that you know of now, and it's talking about, hey, look, like just because you've had a bad day at the office doesn't mean anything. Like it's 1 day out of 30 days in a month. It's one match out of how many matches you've played in the last 6 weeks. Like, what did you do? What did you do well? And I said, some days it's just about the progression. It doesn't matter how much you progress by in terms of integers of progression, as long as it's something. As long as even if it's even if it's like barely noticeable, it's still in the right direction, and that's all that matters.
100%. I think it's like the analogy of it's a marathon, not a sprint. And, if you are running a marathon, you're in your first couple of 100 meters and you have a bad 100 meters, you don't throw in the towel and give up on a race. But in the same breath, you don't panic and start sprinting as fast as you can. There's so much of the race left to go. But by the time you get to the end, you're not even going to notice that little blip, those couple of missteps or, whatever it is, slightly slow for 100 meters. Don't panic. Keep going on the path. Your overall game plan is still going to get you to the destination. It's a case of you're going to have ebbs and flows, and it's a case of just sticking with the plan and trusting the process, and you'll get there. Like you say, it's a case of it's that long-term holistic view rather than that kind of short-term instant gratification. Did I get a reward? No. Okay, panic. It's a case of keep moving forward.
100%. Yeah, I think that's something that'll probably be written as a message on my tombstone. Keep moving forward. I'm not anymore.
So I know that we've both just said we don't want instant gratification wins, but I've got a question for you around this. So if someone was looking for an instant gratification win, so if let's say, for example, you have £50 to spend, you want to spend that money on a way where you can improve your performance and get a really quick, easy win. How would you spend that £50?
That's a stitch up of a question. Right, let me have a think, because that's a good. I like that. I'm gonna have to nick that because that's a great question. £50.
Yeah, so you've got £50 to spend. You can go away. You can buy anything, but you want to use it as a quick way to aid performance, be it.
And this is with my performance development hat, right?
Yes.
Okay, right. And this is only because, well, to be fair, I had to buy it again recently because I lost my old one. But it'd be buying a tripod.
Okay.
And the reason why is because, one thing, cameras don't lie. And the art of tracking and measuring and recording is so vital. On my online performance management and in-person performance management, I try and say to my athletes, as much feedback as you give me, I will give you back, or how much information as you give me, I'll give back. And so when I get videos or when I get a voice note of what's gone on, it's vital. Like, for me, it's like, okay, cool, fine. I've got something in front of me that I can actually give you feedback on. And having a tripod for my own training, I try and record. You probably see too much on my stories. I record all my training just to see what am I doing, because sometimes I'm shifting a toe out or pushing a foot out or my knee out in some compound lifts, or there's certain things that are happening that I didn't notice first time. And it's really vital, not just for your own understanding or training, but if you do have a coach or if you do have someone around you, it's good to look at a performance analysis, performance assessment. It's to see that, okay, what am I doing in certain aspects of a session, whether it be in the gym, on the court, on the field, and really use that as a way of means to kind of track progress. As I said before, in my mentor's kind of voice, Dan Lawrence, what gets measured gets managed. And that's truly and simply the case when you are recording on a proficient basis.
No, I think it's a really, really good shout, actually, because I've done this in terms of with athletes in the past is, set a tripod up, set a camera up. They go off and play their sport, let's say tennis as our example. They're playing and they've got really negative body language, let's say. Their head's down, they're getting frustrated, they're getting angry at themselves, or they're playing some points. If I say to them that that's happened, they might go, no, don't believe you. I think I was playing okay, or it wasn't that bad. You then present the physical evidence, and they go, oh, actually, yeah, the footage doesn't lie. They look at, okay, I agree. Actually, that was negative, or that was, showing visible anger, or whatever it was. And it's that kind of supporting of the idea where you have your kind of footage and go, right, this is exactly what I'm talking about, and this is why we need to make a change, like you say, be it knees on a compound lift, or technique on something really technical, like if you're doing a clean and jerk, for example. Watching it back in, let's say, slow motion is a really useful tool where you can break it down and go exactly if a change needs to be made, and makes it a really visual tool to show where that is. So no, I really like that one. I think that's one of my favourites I've heard so far in terms of recommendations. And it's so powerful where everyone has a camera on their phone now. Everyone has access to quickly getting their phone out, putting it in a tripod, and start recording.
The other thing is everyone trains in the gym. Most people train in front of a mirror. So what's the difference? So it's that kind of feedback, the external feedback which you're seeing rather than feeling. And even the possibilities are endless. I've got some that are doing sprints, some that are doing gym work, some that are doing screening. Big thing for me is screening and being able to assess from pre and post screen after 6 weeks of a mobility block or plan. Is golden, because it's like, look, here we've got some slight knee valgus, we're not so reactive with the toes on the ground on a tuck jump, but then here we are 6 weeks later, we're so much better in kind of X, Y, or Z. And it's good because, like I said, it's got that tracking, but then also you show the athlete, you show that individual, and they get the benefit. You can see visually, they're like, oh my God, it looks so much better. And there's that realization that, okay, right, I'm improving. So it's another factor on top of that kind of reward as well.
Yeah. No, 100%. Like you say, the long-term viewing of improvement is such a good motivator as well. When it's like, I am getting better and better and better and better. Where every time you're, like, say, screening or testing block or whatever it is, you can go, oh, I'm getting better. I'm getting better. I'm getting better. And it really supports that kind of drive to carry on and carry on down the process. I know I bang on about process all the time, but it's such an important kind of area that if you can really get that buy-in and really get that support, be it intrinsically or as a coach, it's a really powerful motivator and tool to help the athlete develop, really.
Yeah, for sure, honestly.
Well, no, thank you for your time today. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. I'm sure we're going to have to jump back on again at some point and talk through some of these topics in more detail, because some really interesting stuff. Before you go, where can people find you if they want to hear more or see some of your content?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm slowly trying to get more active on Instagram. So my Instagram is at my full name, Sami Huseyin SC, and you can reach me there. Alternatively, you can drop me a message on LinkedIn or Facebook, same as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Before you go, I want to share a great resource for any coach, the SP Coaching Journal. It's designed to help any coach of any discipline or sport reflect on their sessions and maximise the improvement of their athletes. If you want to find out more about this resource, check out the link in the bio.